Hey, I'm Renton Millar. I am the head judge of park skating for World Skate. Right now, about to do a judging exercise. We have an event that we ran in 2019 in Nanjing, and we have rejudged that event to give you scores that are going to correlate to how we see park skating is modern park skating. So the process and evaluations that we've done through this particular exercise, we have done it to emulate exactly what we would do as far as any qualification events for the Olympics or the Olympics, and apply the same criteria, the same technique of judging, looking at the run and giving an overall impression at the end, and then giving a score that will correlate to skateboarding in 2024 or 2025, even though this event was held in 2019. So this is an interesting task for a few reasons. As I've mentioned in some of the videos in the past, skateboard competitions aren't consistent every single day as far as the scoring. The scoring can vary and generally does every single time. And that's because the way we score is in a rank order evaluation, which means that you're given a score that correlates to the position that you're going to be in the field. And the scaling between days can vary, and that's just because you have different skateboarders skating in different phases of the competition. And the more you watch skateboarding, the more you'll realize in skate events that you can have a varying score from day to day with very, very similar stuff. So what that means for the task that we're doing right now is I've given my best shot at giving a score that would be relevant to modern times, 2024, 2025. But at the same time, I'm really looking at making sure that I get the order right in the competition that I'm judging as well. So we're just going to note that there might be a little bit of variance just based on the scaling aspect of the event and how it varies from day to day. So this was definitely an interesting task. It also showed me how much skateboarding has progressed since then. It also showed me how much I think the skaters and federations and the coaches have learned about how the judges score. I think by watching this event, I saw a lot of skaters repeating tricks because possibly they weren't quite aware of how much judges are looking at certain things like that. That's one of the criteria that the judges are looking at. They don't want to see people repeat tricks. But in looking at this event, there seemed to be quite a few people repeating tricks, whereas in modern times, it's less so. Also, people go a lot bigger now because we have mandatory helmets. It seems back then, from watching this video, it seems that a lot of the skaters were kind of afraid to give it full gas and really fly, whereas the addition of the helmets means people sort of have less of a care about sort of smashing themselves. They're a bit more secure, and so they go a bit bigger. So with the FOP, it was a pretty fun one to skate. Shallow end, quite mellow, easy to skate. Deep end, quite deep, allowing for some pretty rad vert tricks. We had the bank. I think at that time, whenever we put a bank up, we saw most people do very similar tricks. Saw a lot of bonelesses. Didn't see a lot of variation in tricks. A lot of people doing bonelesses on the bank. So I mean, in this particular event, there was a few people that did tricks up the bank extension, and that was pretty cool. That was a bit different and added a bit of a help with the use of the park in their scores, with their particular scores. We had the bridge. So this bridge wasn't an easy one to skate. I remember it being very long. I remember thinking that it was longer than what I expected it to be when I saw people skating it. You had to hit it with a lot of speed. It wasn't easy to skate, and hence like not everybody's hitting it in the competition. So whenever there's an obstacle that's not easy to skate, the judges are going to reward skaters for using that. It's more of a challenge. It just makes sense. I also found that going over the bridge, it was going to be way harder to go frontside than backside. I think in this competition, we didn't really see too much in the way of advanced tricks over the bridge. It was likely to be some just pretty basic tricks. I think using the bridge in a way that linked together other obstacles, that was also a good thing for people to do. And I think the more advanced skaters linked together that bridge with other obstacles. We also had the spine, and this was pretty cool because being that it was a small transition, I think it allowed for some good variation, a bit of a key feature. Also, I think it's like a spine can be for a non-advanced skater a bit of a trap to going back and forth. If you're just going a straight trick straight over it, it can you can just get straight back and forth, bit of repetition going the same way. I think, to hit it properly, a skater sort of had to hit one obstacle, go through the spine, perhaps, not just going straight over it, but carving over it. I think I saw a few people when they went back and when they went straight over it, it was a lot of back and forth type of approach. Also strange that I did notice as well in watching this video that in the small section we had a lot of people repeating really basic tricks, which is kind of ironic really, because being that it's small and easy to skate, you wouldn't think that we'd have people repeating tricks like backside 50-50s and stuff, but we did, and I think that was possibly the reason being was maybe people back then didn't really understand the judging, and they didn't understand that your whole run needed to be full of different tricks and skateboarding was less advanced. Okay, so the extensions added a bit of difficulty to the small section, a little bit of variety, another obstacle to hit. Small hips were very straightforward, easy to skate, fun to skate, good way to get you from point A to point B doing a trick. So the teardrop, linking a run together using the teardrop was good. Not everybody else used the teardrop, so it added a bit of flavour and added a bit of point of difference to people that used it as opposed to people that didn't. So the deep end was pretty much a vert ramp. Well, it was a vert ramp basically, just with some capsuled corners. One thing about the deep end, if people really repeated the same walls back to back, like just went back to back and half piped it, I think they got punished for that. Ultimately, the easiest sort of wall that you can use in a park is just a straight quarter pipe or a straight vert quarter pipe. So it's good to use them, but if you're using it back to back, like back to back to back to back, you're really repeating the walls. You're repeating something, and as you well know, repeating is a part of the criteria. We don't want to see people repeat tricks or obstacles. So if you're going back and forth, vert ramping it, when you have the opportunity to use the corners and the other obstacles, then you are going to get some problems with repeating, which we saw a few people do in this competition. So this deep end really kind of shone a light on how much skating has progressed, park skating. In 2024, we see massive airs done by a lot of people, big 540s, kickflip 540s, quite a lot of stuff like that. Back then in 2019, it was less so. I think because people weren't wearing pads so much or helmets so much back then, we really weren't seeing big airs and big 540s quite a lot. People have been doing those things, massive airs and massive 540s for a long time, well before this competition. And I think the only reason we didn't see it is because people weren't wearing helmets and pads for a while. And I think that just shows a progression of where we've gone, where we've come from and where we're going. And now we're just seeing a lot of bigger airs, bigger 540s, bigger tricks in the deep ends. And as well, like, also didn't really see any girls do McTwists in the deep end, which is quite different to now. Women's skateboarding is advanced so much, and I think this competition was right before girls started doing 540s in park competitions. I think at the next event or the previous event was the first time we saw Masugu do a mute 540 in a competition and make history for the women. And now it's a bit more commonplace. Okay, so we have the judging exercise from Nanjing 2019, transforming the scores into modern scores. Men's group number 2. So our first skater, the anchor, Steve Pinheiro. So this is a really good run. A lot of different tricks, difficult. A great run for sure. So if I was going to be strict though and judgmental, which I have to because that's what we do, we get judgmental with skateboarding as a judge. If I was going to be strict, I'd say there was a lot of backside 360 rotations. So there wasn't a lot of variation in the tricks, but they were difficult tricks. There was also a little bit of half piping in the deep. There's 5 back-to-back vert walls. So as I've mentioned in some of the other videos, we want to see some variety in the walls that you're hitting. We don't necessarily want to see you hit the same obstacle over and over again, which is essentially what you're doing when you're half piping in the deep. But still a great run. Like the cab at the end was also really, really cool over the spine. But again, you know, he did have a lot of the backside rotations in there. But still a great run, 75.6 for Steve Pinheiro. Okay, so next skater we had Tyler Ettmeyer. So he bailed with 19 seconds remaining. Looked like a great start, but the bail is really going to heavily affect his score. You can't really expect to be bailing so early and still get a good score. So next skater, we've got Runa Glifberg. So some classic Runa style. Focus more on the deep section than mostly other skaters. Got a little half pipey, but he had some really good moves in there. Tail grab over the teardrop is cool because no one seems to be grabbing their tail too much on the smaller section. And he makes it like really look really good. I don't think it really compares to the runs we see these days, but on this day it was a good run. 63 from Rune. Okay, so Greg Ruhoff. So a good start. Nothing standing out too much. Got a little bit half pipey in there. Bail with 10 seconds to go definitely affected him. So next skater, Kieran Woolley. So Kieran a lot smaller than he is now. Back then he had a little bit of a kid style. Not a great deal of power. Definitely a lot for a kid, but when compared to the adults, he doesn't, which affects, his evaluation for the execution part of the overall impression. Has good speed and does execute quite well for someone his size, but again, it's a little kid sort of style. Links the obstacles together really, really well, but he bailed. He rams a lot of tricks in a really short run, but still 26 seconds remaining, it's going to really affect your score heavily. 20.7. Felipe, full run, has some interesting lines, different to other skaters. The line around the bowl is different. So, getting a bit creative with his way around the bowl. His line up to tail slide up onto the bank is great. No one else did that. Good creativity and use of the park. Some difficulty and, a bit of consistency throughout the run. He did have a couple of frontside ollies in there, so some repetition. I don't think it holds up to today's standards, but for back then it was pretty good. 55. Okay, so next skater we had Wsk. So started with a backside nose blunt. So in a particular event like this where you're seeing so many people doing frontside bonelesses, any other trick is going to register well with the judges unless you do the best frontside boneless out of anybody. Backside nose blunt, quite an original move and traditionally speaking known as a difficult move. 5-0 over the bridge is good. It's not the most tech trick of 5-0, but he's doing it over the bridge into an alley-oop frontside 50-50. So he had some good use of the park and it had some difficulty in there with some creativity. Had a little bit of half piping in the deep, which is not optimal, but he's offset that with a bit of difficulty and creativity with the stuff he's doing in there, like not the stuff that everybody's doing. And basically ends with a 360 ollie over the spine. So some good difficulty, originality, creativity in that. And just overall has some fairly good variety in his tricks. So that was a really, really good run from Wsk. I'd give that an 81 by today's standards. James Clark, 10 seconds remaining. Some good park style, linking the obstacles together with speed and flow. Some creativity in there with the half cab frontside blunt to Smith, but just bailing early, so it's going to affect it. 19.5. So next skater, we've got Rupert Tonteri. Not a really high level of skating from Rupert. Had a bit of repetition in there with 250s in a row and a couple of other backside grinds. Didn't really get into the deep before the buzzer. Not a hugely high scoring run and a 20. So next skater, we had Ben Hatchell. He had good use of the park and difficulty with the frontside 3 over the teardrop and the back D up onto the bank. And then going for the nose grinder fakie over the bridge. That would have been a real hammer, would have been one of the hardest tricks we saw on it. The bail really cost him, and he didn't get into the deep. 23.6. Okay, so Pedro Carvalho, boneless on the boneless bank, is a fairly obvious trick. He does it well, but it's very similar trick to what everyone else is doing. It's hard to stand out if you're doing the same stuff as what everybody else is doing. He doesn't have a lot of power as he's just a little kid. I mean, I suppose he has a lot of power for a little kid, but when you compare him to an adult, it's not the same. Judo air is done well. I mean, it's not a difficult trick, but he does it well. The nose grab 540 over the hip is a trick that he does well too. 48 for Pedro. Okay, so next skater we had Tyler. I think there's a really good run back then on that park. I don't think he really repeated anything. He did a multitude of different tricks showing variety. Also hitting a lot of different obstacles. Fairly good consistency. 540 in the deep is pretty stock now, but back then it's pretty sick. A little bit of half piping at the end though. I give Tyler 62. Okay, so next skater, Rune Glifberg. So backside lip slide to the fronts of there was an absolute thing of beauty, like textbook skating. Just to note, in my opinion, I think Rune's a guy that innovated park skating in the 2000s. I don't really think people really understand that he was really someone that that really innovated and brought that style of skating to people's to showing people that type of skating. I think he's a pioneer, and I think the reason is because he was doing stuff like those two moves. Like back in the 2000s, it wasn't like there was a lot of people that could skate big sections of park and small sections of park, and Rune really does it well, and that's a little bit of a vision of that when I see those two moves just done really, really well. The heel flip fronts there was a standout. Don't see anyone else doing that trick at this event. Don't really see that trick being done much these days. And Rune is an innovator of that trick, even on vert or whatever. He was one of the first people to do it, and he really has defined a textbook way of doing it. So great to see it. Also a really risky trick. It's a trick that I don't think would feel very good to bail out of without pads. And I think he did that very well. So he had some great execution. The frontside grind, the spine, I just liked the way he did it. The cab tail had great execution as well. But I will say he did 3 frontside grinds. So unfortunately, that's going to affect his run. There's a little bit of half piping, but the execution was good, so we can let it slide a little. Rune, absolute shredder of skateboarding. I think today, if he did that run, it would be a 63. I think skateboarding's moved quite far ahead. I think, again, as well, with everyone wearing pads and a helmet, stuff like smashing out a lot of stuff in the deep end is done a lot easier, and a lot more people dominate the deep end. And I think Rune would too if he was wearing pads as well. But that's a 63. On that day, he did that, and compared to the modern skating, I think that's a 63. So next skater, Greg Ruhoff. Frontside stand-up grind over the bridge is good. Sugarcane on the bank is also good. Repeats the frontside grind in the deep. There's some half piping. Repeats the frontside as well. It's a good run to watch, but it doesn't hit the criteria for a big score. 34.75. Okay, so Kieran Woolley, bail 24 seconds. That's really going to affect the score. Even if it's someone like Kieran that can cram a lot of stuff into a run, it's looking like a good run, but he just bailed too early. 21.52. Okay, so Felipe Fognino. So starts great, ollieing off the bank into the transition. So starting with the trick into it, I guess that gives you an extra trick. Good use of park as well. The ollie tail slide up the bank into the Indy 3. That's two good moves linked together. Some good difficulty and creativity and use of the park in that combo. Some repetition with a couple of backside 50-50s. I think modern judges are going to be hard on that just because it's a really basic trick and it's not that hard to swap it out for something else, like a backside tail slide. We're talking the best skaters in the world, so repeating a backside 50-50 these days is pretty not that optimal. Also had a backside 5-0 in there. Good run to watch. But again, looking at the criteria, he could have repeated less and perhaps added some difficulty if you were going to compare it to today's standards. 67. Oscar Rosenberg, early bail, 33 seconds to go. I mean, that's just going to be costly. Also, a bit odd that he rolled in and pushed on the flat. Don't know why he did that. 13. Okay, so James Clark, looking like a good run at the start for that day. Unfortunately, then he repeats frontside stand-up grind and bails early. In the end, it didn't have too much to stand out, and the bail just killed his chance to do anything else or get a good score. 19. Okay, so Rupa Tonteri, back-to-back 50-50 is some repetition of a basic trick and then into a backside 5-0, which is showing he doesn't really have a lot of variety or difficulty. There's a kick turn in there as well, which judges will penalise. But I will say the 5-0 to fakie into the fakie feeble over the spine to frontside hurricane was cool and not something we saw other people do. So 23.3 for Rupa. Okay, so Ben Hatchell on his final run. So Ben looks to be quite an advanced skater for this field. At this stage, he was making some podiums at this level of event. Bailing 5 seconds to go is always going to limit the amount of points that you can score. The front 3 is good. The back lip up the bank extension is also very good. Good use of an obstacle. There's a couple of frontside grinds in there, so some repetition. However, he does one to set up to do the feeble grind of the bridge, which is probably the hardest move we see on that. So perhaps we would not hold that too much against him, although actually straight after it, he actually does another frontside grind. So that's 3 frontside grinds. So he's going to definitely be held accountable for that. Yeah. And he also does one in the deep. So 4 of the same basic tricks. So, that's some repetition that judges really can't look away from. But he also did some other great stuff, but ultimately the bail is what cost him the most. 54. Pedro Carvalho, as I said, has a little bit of a kiddie style at this stage. Has some power. Great. He's a great skater on his way up, still developing. Heel flip Indy in the deep is a good trick, but to be honest, to be done in a half pipe that big, you would expect it to be bigger, I think, these days. I think if you get that high these days, it's not really done that well. But a good skater on the come up. That's a 56 from Pedro. Okay, so that's group number 2 of the men's in our judging exercise. Okay, so the Nanjing recap. We're going to go into round number 2 of the women, group number 2. So we have our anchor first, Hunter Long. So she's a fairly mature style compared to some of the other skaters in this event. A lot of emerging countries and a lot of young skaters in this event. So Hunter is definitely more advanced than a lot of other skaters. So I would say that, her tricks are pretty basic. She did lose a bit of power. She repeats some basics. Didn't have a lot of good use of the vert section. I think I'd put that run at a 28. So run number 1, Josefina Tapia. So she had a couple of kick turns in there, which is never good. Always better to carve or do a trick, obviously. She rolled over the teardrop, which is not optimal. But what she did do, which was cool, was an air into the vert corner, which adds some flavour. Everyone does straight up and down vert airs on big vert quarter pipes. So when you take it into the corner, it adds a little bit of flavour to it, I think. Hand plant was under coping, grabbed early. Always better, obviously, on a hand plant. Like anytime you do a hand plant, like put your hand on the coping and try and get it as upside down as you can. Yeah, the execution wasn't too good. The bail affected her run. It wasn't her best run. I'd give that a 17.5. Okay, so Indiara Asp. So great use of the park. It's the first time we've seen a bridge transfer. So rewarded for that. Also get rewarded for hitting the teardrop and then hitting the extension grind to drop off. Good use of the park. It's mature skating. The front feet in the corner of the deep was pretty advanced for back then, difficulty-wise, but the execution wasn't that good. She bailed with 4 seconds to go, which really would hurt her score. 44 is the score I'd give it. It's still a fairly good score because it's more mature skating than the rest of the field. Better use of the park, but it's still nothing that's going to really get her too far in the modern competitions, mainly because of the bail. Okay, so Kisa Nakamura. So just like Indiara, in this event, Kisa is more developed than most of the field. Her execution and power is a lot better. Her airs are bigger. She's doing backside tail slides like other people doing 50-50s, multiple 50-50s in the small section. She does backside tail slide. I think that's great. I think backside tail slide's a fantastic trick. She also does the alley-oop frontside 50-50. I think it's quite clear she's on a different level to the other girls in this competition that we're seeing in these groups. She's the only girl that goes frontside over it. I think frontside over that was quite long, quite difficult to do. She bails, so her consistency takes a hit, but still a great run. 64.5. Okay, so Xin Shang. Fairly basic start. Nice style, not a lot of difficulty. Did the teardrop gap, which is good use of that obstacle, but not really linking it with other obstacles. A lot of carving and her bail really affected the consistency of her run. 17. Okay, so Bryce Wetstein, another mature skater, a skater that looks ahead of other skaters in this group, or ahead of some of the other younger skaters that we've seen so far in Group 1 and Group 2, and actually just from experience of what I saw in general at that competition. But we just had Kisa skate and Indiara, and they're quite mature as well. So 50-50 to fake over the bridge is, comparatively speaking, the most difficulty in a move over the bridge for that field that we've seen so far. No one else is doing that move, so we're going to reward it. She bailed with 4 seconds to go, and I think, that's always going to be costly, bailing. She had okay use of the park. I think at this stage, a lot of the tricks are one trick added, as opposed to a line of tricks really linking them together. But she had good tricks and she used the obstacles, just didn't really link them together greatly. But a good one, good run from Bryce. Okay, so that's a score of 43 for Bryce. Okay, so Amelia Brodka, run number 1. So not a huge amount of difficulty compared to modern skating, or actually even this field. Fairly good use of the park, but not a standout run. Amelia is a pioneer of girls skateboarding, and it wouldn't be where it was without her. So she's definitely contributed, but I don't think she didn't have a standout run at this event. Score of 26 for Amelia. Okay, so Kihana Ogawa. Lots of power, using the vert but not half piping it. Backside blunt is a difficult trick in this field. She's got a good style. The backside kickflip is great. The kickflip disaster transfer over the spine was great too. Given she flipped twice with no grab and had a good line, it's going to get a good score. However, the backside rollout really cost her. You can still get a good score because of the two flips and just the stuff she's done, but I think the backside rollout really did cost her. There's a little bit of repetition there with the tail transfer over the spine, but a great run, very good even with the mistake. So 66 for Kihana Ogawa. Okay, so Josefina Tapia, run number 2. She added a big spin disaster, which brings a lot of difficulty to her run. So she got a good bonus for that, 25. Indiara Asp, run number 2. So she made the whole run this time. She added a slob fast plant and a frontside air. So she's pretty far ahead of most or all who came before her in this competition. She's got mature, great skateboarding. In this competition, she's competing against a lot of skaters where most aren't putting together an overall impression that is anywhere near as good. She added 2 tricks and got quite a nice boost in her score, because that's really what took away from her score last time, was not making her run. It was great skating, well-rounded, nice overall impression, and so far the best run, 72. Okay, so Kisa Nakamura, second run. So first impression, the backside Smith locks better than the first run. She had a great variety of tricks. The fiver over the spine is great. She doesn't stall the blunt to fakie like we see some other skaters do, and I think that's the difference between like a well-developed skater and a younger skater. When a younger skater skates, they do stuff. Generally, it's not all younger skaters, but a lot of them do stuff with less refined execution. And I think Kisa has just shown in this, what a more developed, mature skater, how they would do a trick like a blunt. Half cab over the spine is great, but the only thing is she bails on the dismount, which kind of sucks because she could have just popped out and probably just got no punishment. So great run, overall impression is great, variation is great, difficulty is great, consistency is really good except for the bail, flow, execution, a great run. It's just the fail at the end was a problem though. Okay, so second run score for Kisa was 65.5. Okay, so second run for Xing Shang. So better run, a lot of carving and a lot of basics, so lacking a bit of consistency and difficulty. She does the teardrop transfer. She made a run, so she gets a 29. Okay, so Bryce Wetstein, second run. So she made a full run. Difficult tricks, a variety of tricks. Consistency and flow was good. Low on repetition, even though she did do 2 back-to-back backside airs. Good use of the deep end, linked a lot of tricks together. I think this was the best run of the phase, but I think in modern times there'd be a lot of people at this level. It was a great run. There's a creative choice of tricks. Much of what she did was unique and no one else did those tricks. It would have been good to see a bit better use of the park, somehow linking together the teardrop or the bridge. 74. Okay, run number 2, Amelia Brodka. So coming off early and just she gets punished for her consistency, 16.7. Okay, so Kihana Ogawa, pretty much the same run with the bail and the kickflip. Clearly not her best run. We give her a 22. Okay, so that's groups number 1 and 2 for women of this exercise. So the way I've scored this, I have made it so the scores from both groups correlate. So if you put them together, they should make a ranking that is all correct between both of them. Yeah, thank you for watching.